Measures Project Aesthetic Alternatives and Public Input Session. I'm Christine Butterfield with Management Partners, and I'm so pleased to be with you again this evening. Before we begin, I want to walk through a couple of meeting logistics. First, if you're interested in taking advantage of the language interpretation services, please click on the interpretation button on your Zoom bar and select the language that you wish to refer to. And at this point, I'd like to invite our interpreters to introduce themselves to our audience.
This is Lauren Tran, Vietnamese interpreter.
Great. Tiffany?
Hi, this is Tiffany's Vietnamese interpreter. Can you assign the language for us? Because otherwise we cannot do our job.
Yes, as soon as you guys introduce yourself, I will launch the interpretation.
Got it. Thank you.
Let's move on to Manuel.
Hi, I'm Manny or Manuel. I'm the Spanish interpreter. Intérprete en español.
And then Armando.
Yes, good evening. This is Armando Cruz, Spanish interpreter. Voy a estar interpretando para las personas que deseen en español.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And just to review, I know many of you are quite familiar with how to operate Zoom over the past couple of years. We certainly have had plenty of opportunities. First, for those of you that may experience any internet disruptions, we encourage you to dial into the meeting. The number is 669-900-9128. And the webinar ID is 860-6689-3825. And of course, if you would like to participate in the meeting, we encourage you to tap on your Zoom function bar, raise hand, and you'll be recognized. When we move to the second hour of our meeting, you'll certainly have an opportunity to pose questions to staff on the aesthetic alternatives and ask any clarifying questions. In addition, you're welcome to submit questions through the Q&A portal. So our agenda, we've started with our introductions. I will move on to a welcome from the Board of Directors, but the flow for tonight's meeting, you'll hear a presentation from staff on the Coyote Creek Flood Protection and Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures Project. Then, because the meeting is virtual and we really won't have the opportunity to have typical small group discussions if we were in person, staff will share with you pop-up questions, poll questions, or a survey. And in real time, you'll have an opportunity to share your preferences based on the aesthetic alternatives that they offer. In addition, if there are community members that are unable to attend this evening's meeting, Valley Water will post on its website a survey for about a week so other folks can weigh in and share their preferences on those aesthetic options. Just as far as guidelines for the meeting, please refer any legal questions to legal representatives, and also direct questions related to creek cleanup, homeless encampments, and other real estate matters to members of the project team. I'll introduce Julianne and Jose shortly following the meeting. And as I mentioned earlier,
Como mencioné anteriormente,
the second hour of the meeting,
la segunda hora de la junta,
will be opened to you to pose questions to staff related to the aesthetic alternatives. And what we'll do in that second hour is we'll walk through each of the neighborhoods where the projects impact. For instance, we'll start with Watson Park, move on to Rock Spring Park, then William Street Park, and then we'll open it up probably the last 15 minutes to just general flood protection project questions. And to forecast, of course, there'll be more opportunities to provide input, likely open houses this spring and summer. So with that, meeting logistics, as you know, and you can see on your screen, this meeting's being recorded. It'll be posted at www.valleywater.org/Coyote-Creek. You can look for any other project information in that same location. As I mentioned, tonight's meeting, it'll be exciting to launch these polls and survey questions, and you will see the real-time result related to your neighbors' preferences. The meeting is also being telecast on Facebook Live. We'll work hard, as we've done in the past, to rotate between questions posed by our Facebook audience, as well as those that are participating in the Zoom meeting, either virtually or by phone. And again, use the Q&A portal, raise your hand. And if you have any questions that arise through the course of the presentation, we encourage you to jot them down. And again, we'll address them in the second hour of the presentation. You can also refer to the frequently asked questions and answers that are also available at the project website. And we thank you in advance for your patience. Virtual meetings are always a learning opportunity. So thanks for joining. And again, we appreciate your patience. So now I'd like to turn it over to the Board of Directors and introduce Director Barbara Keegan. She represents District 2. She's a civil engineer and has served in executive management roles for the City of San Jose and Valley Water. Director Keegan.
Thank you very much,
Muchas
Christine,
gracias, Cristina,
for the introduction,
por la
and welcome
introducción.
to everyone joining us
Bienvenidos.
tonight. My name is Barbara Keegan, and I'm proud to serve as your District 2 representative on the Valley Water Board of Directors. As you may already be aware, as Christine referenced, we had intended for this meeting to be held in person, but given the current county health situation, the safety of our neighbors, our staff remains our top priority. So we shifted to a virtual event out of an abundance of caution. So thank you very much for your understanding of this and your flexibility and your continued interest in the latest project details. We really appreciate it. Joining us tonight are directors. I see that Director Richard Santos is already in attendance, and my understanding is that we will also have Director Esther Mera join us at this meeting as well. And the three of us represent sections of Coyote Creek and the communities alongside it. And these projects are very important to all three of us and to the entire board as well. I also want to welcome the fact that there are representatives from the City of San Jose. Mindy Nguyen, who is here representing Councilmember Perales' office. I saw her that she's already in attendance. And I also saw that Eve Zudi of the San Jose Parks Department is here as well. And I just want to acknowledge the fact that San Jose has been a great partner in this project, and our respective staffs have been discussing the various project elements, especially concerning the park, which is very important. I don't know if there are any other elected officials here. Are staff aware of anyone else that we should acknowledge at this time? Okay, hearing none, I'll go on. This past October, we held design meetings at Rock Springs, William Street, and Watson Parks, where we received comments on the flood elements and design details for each park. And there was a lot of communication from the public. We really listened. And since then, the project design team has evaluated and incorporated many of the suggestions that we received. They've also had discussions with the San Jose Police Department to ensure that the design elements that are included as part of the project in no way would hinder the ability of patrol officers to view and access parks, because that was a concern that we heard at previous meetings. So tonight, you're going to hear an update on the projects, updated timeline, and current project elements. And then we'd like to get your feedback on the aesthetics and related design details. Obviously with flood control projects, they need to protect people from floods, but they also need to look good and be compatible with the people and neighborhoods that surround them. So as we listen to the presentation, we'd like to ask you to think about what you value the most about your community and how those values and interests can be reflected in the aesthetic elements of these projects. I mean, your input is really critical in this area. It will help us get these projects to their next stage of being closer to construction. And after tonight's meeting, there will continue to be future opportunities to provide input and ask questions, as Valley Water intends to host open houses this spring and summer. So be on the lookout for these details. Completing the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project and Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures Project are critical to the safety of this community. We must keep these projects moving forward and get them to construction. So thank you again for participating tonight. We look forward to having you involved in every step of the project. Your participation is really essential. And I'd like to end on a different note by sharing that although we are talking about flood protection today, and we did receive some reasonable amounts of rain in December, we're still in the middle of a severe drought. So we ask your assistance in please continuing to conserve water and to use it wisely. And you can visit www.watersavings.org for additional ways to save water, take advantage of rebates, or report water waste. Again, thank you for being here. And Christine, back to you.
Great, thanks, Director Keegan. I also want to just acknowledge that we have staff members from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Myra Molina, as well as representatives from the Regional Water Quality Control Board, Susan Glenn Denning. So thank you both for being with us tonight. So again, just a brief review of the process tonight. You're going to hear an overview of the project, as well as a presentation of the flood protection project aesthetics and design alternatives. And then after those alternatives are presented, you're going to be invited to share your preferences with a poll that Valley Water staff will post. Really easy to use. You'll see the poll pop up, and then staff will present the trends and the percentage of preferences. Your responses, as you've heard, will inform the final design of the flood protection projects, and it is very important. And as I mentioned earlier, the second hour will wrap up with a Q&A opportunity, and that'll be linked specifically to the alternatives of each neighborhood park and the polling results. So we'll work pretty methodically, again, starting with Watson Park, moving on to Rock Spring Park, William Street Park, and then overall flood protection project. And we'll do that in the second hour. So with that, it is just my pleasure to introduce this project team that I've had the pleasure of working with over the past couple of years, and they are so passionate about this project and excited to share the alternatives that they have to present this evening. And again, you've heard us mention a couple of times, but the project information is available at www.valleywater.org/coyote-creek. Let me proceed with the team. So I'd like to introduce Jose Villarreal, the public information representative that makes all of the communications tied to this project happen. Jose, do you want to say hello?
Hello, welcome everyone. My email will be posted later on, and I'm sure I've met many of you. So if there's any questions or any comments following the meeting, feel free to contact me, and I'm more than happy to help you get an answer to your questions. And again, thank you again for joining us tonight.
And then next is Julianne O'Brien, the project manager, who I know many of you in the meeting this evening have had face-to-face conversations with her. She will lead the presentation, but to kick us off, I want to introduce Alec Nicholas, who's the capital project manager, and he's going to provide some high-level overview information to get us started. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my presentation and turn it over to Valley Water staff.
Thank you very much, Christine. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alec Nicholas. I am the Capital Engineering Manager, providing oversight on the Coyote Creek flood management measures and flood protection projects. So this evening, we are here to give everyone an update on the 30% design, but also we're going to be recapping what we, Valley Water, has heard from you in the past several meetings. We're also going to provide like I mentioned, that there's 30% design updates. We're going to discuss the aesthetic options, solicit your input through polls and surveys, and then we'll wrap up discussing next steps and future opportunities for public engagement and feedback. Quick recap of the project schedule. The planning phase was completed in June of 2020, which kicked off the design phase for both projects. We show the flood management measures project, which is the more accelerated of the two, in yellow, and the flood protection project in purple. Both of them are currently in the design phase. Since June of 2020, in June 2020, we held 3 public meetings. In July of 2021, we also held another public meeting to provide update on the design status. And then in October of 2021, as Director Keegan mentioned, we held 3 in-person or hybrid meetings in various different parks, and we've received a lot of feedback that was very useful from the community. We took that feedback, we shared it with our design consultants, and we have revised and improved the design to address those concerns that were shared with us, and we are here to present those to you today. Some of that feedback that we received, for example, at Watson Park, there was members of the community that shared that they wanted to make sure that the electrical utilities that provided lighting to the park were protected from future similar flood events of February 2017. So we worked with our design consultant, and they are currently designing flood elements to protect those electrical utilities, so there is no downtime in the lighting to the park after a flood event. Similarly, for William Street Park and Selma Linder Park, there's a lot of concerns about trees. There's a lot of concerns about vegetation maintenance, safety, access to the park for big events in the community, such as Bark in the Park. There were concerns, or there were potential solutions offered of taking half of the passive barriers from Selma Linder Park and constructing them at William Street Park. Well, we're happy that you shared all that feedback with us. It was very useful. We took that into consideration. We worked with our design consultant, and I'm happy to report that not only will the Selma Linder Park passive barriers be staying as in place, but we will be including new passive barriers along 16th Street and William Street for William Street Park. So moving forward, I'd like to bring on Julianne O'Brien, the project manager, to share more information about the 30% design and kick us off with the polls.
Thanks, Alec. Hello, everybody. As both Christine and Alec have mentioned, I'm Julianne O'Brien. I'm the project manager for both Coyote Creek projects. And I'm going to start by just kind of doing a real quick recap of the different design elements that are proposed, just to refresh everybody's memory, and then we'll move forward into the updates. So as you may recall, there are 5 reaches that we broke the project into, and in the Coyote Creek Flood Management Project, which is the higher, or the more expedited project, and this is the one with the current completion date of December of 2023. That includes all of the elements in Reach 5, some of the elements in Reach 6, and some of the elements in Reach 7. Then the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project, which is the later completion date of the end of 2025, is all of Reach 4, the remaining elements of Reach 6 and 7, and then all of Reach 8. And so again, a quick recap of what is proposed in Reach 4. We have flood walls on either side of Charcot Avenue and either side of the creek here. And then we have a passive barrier on both sides of the Charcot Avenue Bridge that will rise up in a flood event and act as one continuous flood wall with the flood walls on either side. Then recapping for Reach 5, we have a proposed levee here that will connect to the existing levee that's behind the Golden Wheel Mobile Home Park. And then we will have flood walls on both the west side of the creek as well as the small flood wall on the east side of the creek. Moving on to Reach 6, as a reminder, we've got flood walls on both sides of the creek north of 101. Then south of 101, we have a series of flood walls on the eastern side that will protect both Highway 101 itself, the Kellogg facility, as well as the apartment complexes here in this area. Then on the west side of Coyote Creek, we have a series of flood walls in Watson Park that will be connected here at the entrance to Watson Park with a passive barrier and a berm that will all ensure that the water stays in Watson Park during a flood event and not impact the surrounding community. Then in Reach 7, we have a series of flood walls that have been shown on both sides of the creek. And we've got the passive barriers along Selma Olinder Park. And then the big change, which Alec already mentioned earlier, is around the perimeter of William Street Park. This had previously been shown as a vegetated berm, but after the feedback and comments that we received in October at the public meeting, we have updated this to be a passive barrier as well. And we'll get into those details a little bit later tonight. And then additionally, we have a few properties here outlined in purple that were identified as low-lying properties that are currently slated for either elevation or acquisition. And we are working with those individual property owners to determine the best fit for those properties. And then last but not least, we have Reach 8, and we have a flood wall proposed here in the northern corner behind the apartments at 12th and Key Street. We have another flood wall down here at the San Jose Water Company property. And then we will be expanding upon the existing vegetated berm and flood wall at Rock Springs. We will be removing and replacing those, making them both longer and approximately a foot taller to provide additional protection to that neighborhood. So now what we are going to do is we're going to get into the flood wall aesthetic options. And this will be one of the first options that we will be soliciting some feedback from you as the community. And while right now we are focused on trying to narrow down the type of aesthetics that we're looking at, each one of these types that we're going to present has several options in terms of what that final product will look like. We have shown a few pictures just to give you an idea of the representation of what that could look like. This is no means an exhaustive list. Today, we're just trying to narrow down the type, and then as the design progresses, we will work on more specifics. So the first option is a wood panel that would be affixed to the outside of the wall. And so it would make it look, we've got a composite decking, or we've got some vertical slats. Again, there's several options on that. The second option too is a metal panel. Again, there's several varieties that this could look like. We've got continuous metal panels. We could have a partial metal panel. So that could be a potentially more decorative option. Option 3 is a green screen, and this one would not be mounted directly on the wall. This would be offset a little bit to allow maintenance staff access to inspect and maintain the integrity of the flood protection element. But this would allow for a more natural looking cover. We would coordinate with the community on what is planted, but we would be likely looking for native drought tolerant plants. Then option 4 would be not to have any treatment at all. We would have the wall for a concrete wall, which would be an exposed concrete wall. And then in the locations where we have metal walls, that metal would just be exposed to the outside. And then option 5 is more would be embedded more into the wall. So for example, on the concrete wall type, it would be stamped or formed into the wall as the wall is being constructed. And then similarly for the metal wall types, it would be a metal panel that's kind of constructed at the same time with the wall. So those are the main options, and we will launch a poll with those at the specific locations we're looking for feedback. So stay tuned for that. So the first park that we're going to talk about today is Watson Park. As a reminder, we've got the wall protection here around the electrical equipment that Alec mentioned that was added, and then the flood wall along the existing sound wall alignment. And then we have the wall here behind Empire Gardens Elementary School. So the facades that we were just showing you, that would be on the park side of the wall that we are asking for your feedback at this point. The private property owners will get to determine what it looks like on their side of the wall. And so here is an existing picture of what the entrance to Watson Park looks like today. And so here's the existing sound wall. This is a rendering showing you what the proposed flood wall along here would look like, as well as the passive barrier that we mentioned that would be located here at the entrance. Again, this during the day-to-day, this would be flat, as you can see here. And then during a flood event, it would rise up to protect the surrounding community and keep the water in the park. And then here we have the vegetated berm on the side that will connect to the raised area of the park. And then, so again, keeping in mind this wall and the park side of the wall here, these are the 5 options that we just talked about. We've got our option 1 is the wood panel wall type. Option 2 is the metal panel wall type. Option 3 is the green screen. Option 4 would be no treatment. And then option 5 would be the concrete surfacing wall types. So we will go ahead and launch our first poll. Okay, and then Jose, when it looks like the majority of people have voted, we can go ahead and close the poll.
Julianne, it's Christine. I know that we're planning to run through the presentations, launch the polls, and then have discussions in the second hour. But there is a question as to whether or not the array of options provide a different level of protection.
No, so the wall itself will be what provides the protection. The options that we're showing here would just be purely aesthetic.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and close this poll since we answered that question. Closing. And let me know when you're ready to show the results.
Go for it. Okay, so it looks like the majority are in favor of the green screen wall in this location, with the concrete surfacing coming in as second. So we'll discuss this option or these results later in the presentation. Thank you all for voting and participating. Okay, so now we are going to move. So last here for Watson Park, before we move on, we have a rendering of what the passive barrier will look like when it is in the raised condition. Moving on to Rock Springs Park, for those of you that are familiar with the area, there in 2017, a berm and a flood wall were constructed as an emergency measure in response to the 2017 flood event. What we will be looking to do with this project is expand upon what was constructed previously. So we will be removing and replacing both the berm and the wall with a new berm and a new flood wall. Both of them will be approximately 1 foot higher than what is there, and they will also be quite a bit longer. In the case of the berm in particular, you can see it will now wrap around the Springbrook condominiums to protect those in place. Then we have a couple pictures to show you what the wall looks like in its current condition. And again, it will be approximately 1 foot taller than what you see here. And then here's another picture. And again, it'll be approximately 1 foot taller than what you see here. And so to give you some perspective in terms of what this one is, the wall in its current state does not have a aesthetic treatment to it. So that can give you a bit of an idea of what this could look like, depending on what the options chosen are. So again, now we're thinking specifically on Rock Springs Park. We have the same options as before. I'll run through them really quick, just for fun. So option 1 is a wood panel wall type that would be, again, affixed to the wall. Metal panel wall type is option 2. Option 3 would be a green screen. Option 4 would be no treatment. And then option 5 would be a concrete embedded, or the stamped embedded into the concrete wall. You can go ahead and launch the poll here, Jose. Thank you.
Just as a reminder to folks that after today's meeting, we will put the survey on the project page, so that if your neighbors aren't able to attend today, they can go to the project webpage, click on the survey link, and make their options known. And it'll be up for a week starting tomorrow. And then, of course, on our folks watching Facebook Live, I'm sure we provided the link for folks there as well, for folks to also submit their preferences. I will be closing the poll now. And here are the results.
Okay, looks like we have a little bit more of a closer tie between a green screen wall and the concrete surfacing wall here. Jose, we may want to do a runoff later when we do our poll recap portion between those two options. So between option 3 and 5.
3 and 5 folder.
Thank you. Okay, thank you again for participating, everybody. Now we are moving on to William Street Park. Right now, what I have shown here is a plan view of the proposed passive barriers here, the more angular pathway, and then a revised concrete pathway here that would provide continuous walkway around what we are calling the wiper walls. So the passive barriers, due to their nature, unlike a flood wall or a berm, in order to have a change in direction of the path, we have to install one of these walls to provide that continuous seal and protection of the barrier as it makes the turn. And one of the options that we will be looking for feedback from the community later on is what those walls will look like. The alignment is still being worked out, particularly in this area. Part of that will depend on the results of one of the polls that we have later on in this for this park. But as you can see, we have really revised how the alignment impacts the existing trees. It will drastically reduce the impacts to those trees. And by doing a passive barrier, we have removed the access impediments to the park that people were concerned about. We've maintained the visual access into the park, and the walls, there's some options to kind of incorporate some new signs and other elements to have them be part of the park and not just a flood protection element. So this is a shot kind of near the corner of 16th Street and William Street. As it stands now, you can see the community garden over here in the corner of the picture. Then here is a rendering of what those passive barriers could look like. Here is one of the wiper walls that we mentioned. Here is another one. This is that pathway that we would add to ensure that there's continual access around the wiper walls. And right now in this picture, we are showing a landscape little strip between the passive barrier and the existing sidewalk with a couple access points along 16th Street that would allow people to enter the park. But this is one of the options that we're looking for feedback for the community. You will see that an alternative would be to adjust the alignment of the passive barriers to have it be closer and really hug the existing wall. There may be a few areas where we would have to, expand on the sidewalk a little bit to fill in the gaps. The advantage to this is it provides continual undisrupted access along 16th Street to the park. However, it is potentially a lot of concrete and visually may not be as appealing to the neighbors as the landscape strip. So our first poll that we will be launching for William Street Park is to gauge what the preference is in terms of the landscape buffer strip here versus no buffer strip. I do want to point out that while we are showing a couple access points here along the landscape strip, that, if the landscape strip is chosen, we would work with the community to determine, how frequently we need to have one of these access points and where those locations would be best suited. So that would be something we would continue to work with the community on. Jose, we can go ahead and launch the poll for this one.
Just as a reminder, we're getting some really good questions in the chat, but we need attendees to please put their questions in the Q&A box so that staff can address them. So if you've submitted something to the chat, please put it in the Q&A and staff will be able to address your questions and comments. Thank you. Looks like we're done voting on this one, and we're going to go ahead and end the poll and launch the results. And here are the results.
Okay, looks like the majority of the respondents prefer the landscape strip. So that's great. Thank you all for your feedback on that. And again, we will continue to refine what that looks like as the design progresses. Okay. Moving on, hold on. There we go. So just for reference, here is a rendering of what the passive barrier system would look like when during a flood event, when it is in the raised position. As you can see, the park would be flooded, but the water is staying within the park. We've got a couple other renderings just to show you some of the areas of what this will look like once the project is implemented. So this is a little bit further on William Street, looking towards the pedestrian bridge over the creek. This is the current view. Here is a rendering of what it would look like with the passive barriers. Right now, this area here is proposed to be one of the passive barriers that raises straight up. And then this area here would be one of the lay flat passive barriers that tilts up. Because of the wiper wall, we would not be able to really have this as an access way down. It wouldn't go anywhere. People are, would be fine to walk on it, but there's not a connection here to the sidewalk below, but the sidewalk that is there existing would remain. And then here is a rendering of what that will look like when the barriers are activated and in the upright position. And here, kind of if you're standing at the same spot we just were, but now looking into the park, this is the existing layout in that area. Here is a rendering of what that same passive barrier would look like in the flat condition with the existing walkway. And then this rendering is what it would look like if you were in the creek during a flood event, but the water hasn't come in yet. So the passive barriers are all in the upright position, but there's no water. So you're never really going to have this condition, but this demonstrates what that would look like for you. Then the wiper walls that we've been talking about. Here we have 3 different options that of what those could look like. The front face here is going to need to be flat and in order to provide a good seal as the wall flips up during a flood event. But on the interior walls, we have some opportunities to incorporate some elements for the public. One that we're showing here, so option 1 would be a seated bench, and then we've got some landscape on top. Option 2 would be some signage on the wall and then have it just be a flat wall, nothing on top. And then option 3 that we're showing here is again some signage or artwork on the wall, but then landscaping and or a tree in the planter area. So we can go ahead and launch the poll here, Jose.
I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and show the results.
Okay, so it looks like basically the straight signage in either the tree or the seated seating incorporated in the landscaping are the 2 leading votes. One thing that we can talk about more when we open it to to the discussion is, determining which elements of those 2 options were driving those choices, because it could be that we want to do maybe the seating and a tree or something to that effect. So we can definitely discuss that further in the presentation. And I think our last poll is trying to get a sense of how we want these passive barriers and that pathway to look like. One option is, as we've shown kind of here, to have a more beige, natural dirt trail like stain on the passive barrier so it blends into the park and looks more like an actual trail. So that would be option 1. Option 2 would be kind of matching the existing concrete. So have it look more like the sidewalk that is there currently. And then option 3 would be more of a greenish color, again, trying to have it blend into the park more. So those are the 3 options that we're presenting for this poll.
Okay. Oh, got a few more. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and share the results.
Okay, looks like the majority of people preferred more the natural dirt path color. So we will keep that in mind as the design progresses. So thank you again, everyone that participated in the voting. Okay, and I think, okay, yep. With that, I will stop my share and turn it back over to Christine to review the logistics for the Q&A portion.
Great, thanks. That was really interesting and enlightening. So as we move on to this portion of the meeting, just a reminder, if you're going to be submitting your questions by raising your hand and joining the meeting by voice, we just encourage you to listen with an open mind, submit your questions. To participate again in the Q&A portal, as we mentioned earlier in the meeting, I know that Valley Water staff added to the chat. Please submit your questions in the Q&A portal, and then Jose supported that as well. So keep those questions coming in the Q&A portal. Be curious, assume good intent. use productive language, be brief and concise, so everyone can participate that wants to participate. And if you do have questions related to litigation, refer that to your respective legal counsel. And we really are just going to focus on these aesthetic alternatives. And I know that in just monitoring the chat, as folks were moving questions over the Q&A, there are a lot of very general questions related to the walls. Maybe we may want to tee up before we jump into the specifics of Watson Park, Rock Spring Park, and William Street. Related to that, if you do have questions about the creek cleanup, the any homeless encampment or other real estate matters, we encourage you to direct those to staff after the meeting, and either Julianne or Jose can assist you with that. And again, meeting logistics, the meeting's being recorded. As you know, you've participated in the polls. We'll be interested to see how you enjoyed that. And again, these polls will be live for about a week for folks that didn't have the opportunity to join tonight. They can share their preferences. We'll do our best to rotate between Facebook Live and Zoom. And I think in my last review, we have 7 people participating. 10 participating on Facebook Live. And again, be sure to refer to the Valley Water project page at www.valleywater.org/coyote-creek. And with that, I'm gonna stop my share. And Julianne, I guess we can go into the Watson Park slide. I do think it'd be good to start with these general questions, because it sounds like a number of people, there are themes, have similar questions. So with that, we have a question on what are the pros and cons of the various alternatives as it relates to upkeep and durability?
That is a good question. We have not yet dived a whole too deeply into those right now. We were just trying to solicit feedback on preferences from the community, just to get a sense of narrowing down our options, because there are many options out there. That will be kind of the next step, is taking this feedback, looking at what the pros and cons are for like maybe the first 2 choices. And then, as I mentioned earlier, some of these choices, while we showed 2 or 3 pictures for those options, there's a lot of different options beyond those pictures that would still meet that general aesthetic look. So that'll be part of this next round.
The next round of meetings, which would likely be the open houses in the spring. Is that correct?
Yes. So the next round on the design.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then we do have a question. I want to tee this up first too, because it's a general question. How many community members are participating in the meeting tonight? It looks like we have 73 participants in Zoom, and with 10 on Facebook Live, that's 83. A portion of that includes staff. So that is the response to that question. It's a healthy number of folks participating. This is similar, a similar question on a maintenance, and we're seeing it repeatedly. Whoops. Do the walls have planned maintenance costs? Number 1, and you've already answered that the alternatives will be addressed in the open house meetings in the spring. So maybe that answers that question. And then also we see a pattern of a question from those participating tonight of who'd be responsible for that maintenance.
So for the flood protection element, so the wall itself, and maintaining the integrity of the flood protection element, making sure the wall does what it needs to do during a flood event, that will be Valley Water's responsibility. Then in terms of the actual aesthetic feature that's on there, that is typically in public places, the responsibility of the public property owner, which in these cases would be City of San Jose Parks. And we will be coordinating with them directly on that as part of the easement coordination as we prepare those documents moving forward, but that's typically how that would work.
Okay. And it sounds like that's a common theme. That's a common theme across a number of these questions. Another general question. Let's see. Can passive barriers be more intentionally incorporated into the sidewalk to reduce the width of the concrete or metal?
I believe, I think I saw that one. I think it was specifically targeted to the 16th Street area, William Street Park. We can, that is something that we are looking into. The main hindrance to that is the fact that the sidewalk and the alignment along 16th Street currently curve, which, as I mentioned earlier, is tricky with the passive barriers, because that would mean more wiper walls, more of these transition angle points, which would then be in direct conflict with the sidewalk itself, because then you would have this wall in the sidewalk blocking access. So accessibility is an important feature for the park, both in terms of along the road and into the park. So that was part of how we ended up with the alignment that we have, but that is something that we are continuing to refine to see if we can reduce that and make it a little bit more in tune with the existing sidewalk.
Okay. And related to that, we have another question. It reads, I need to better understand how the passive barriers work dynamically. I wonder if you can just talk about the mechanics
Sure.
of it transitioning from a level surface to a.
Yeah, if I will definitely attempt to explain that here. I will also say that in our July public meeting, which that video is posted on the website, project website, that we had a few slides that better showed that. So that would also be a good reference point for whomever is asking that question to, as a follow-up. But basically, as I mentioned, it lies flat during the day-to-day. And then as there's like a reservoir underneath it. And so as the flood event happens, as the water comes into the park, it fills that area, and that causes the wall itself to rise up. The buoyancy of that water causes the wall to rise up. In locations where there will be traffic implications, for example, Sharkot Avenue and the bridge, and then the entrance to Watson Park, we do plan on having a manual override as well, so that we can go out there and proactively close those or raise those passive barriers ahead of time to ensure that traffic does not get stuck in those locations.
Thank you.
And if I may add, Christine, because I do see a couple of comments on the same topic. When these passive barriers are laying flat, you can walk on them, you can bicycle on them. They have been used across roadways, just as Julianne mentioned. We're going to be proposing to use it along Sharkot Avenue and the entrance roadway to Watson Park. They've been used across freeways in Texas most recently. So you can walk on it, you can drive on it, and you can bicycle on it as well.
Thank you very much, Alec. I was just going to move on to the next question. And let's see. The other question that came up, and it doesn't designate a specific location, and it's something that the staff team talked about in our preparation, and that's can those walls be painted by a local artist?
That is something that we can certainly look into if that is something that the community would be interested in. I know there is a pilot program that Valley Water is looking into to provide some public art in those locations, that could be applied to those locations. I know in the past, there's been some resistance to that, which is part of why we did not present that as an option. But if community is interested in that in some of these locations, shoot me an email or add that to the survey. I think we have a feedback at the end as well. We can definitely look into that.
Great. And then we talked about this a little bit earlier, but based on the flood level that occurred in 2017, what's the likelihood that a flood would overtop the passive barriers?
So all the elements that you saw today and this entire project is designed to protect the community from a flood of similar size to the 2017 event, which was the equivalent of a 20-year storm. It will not protect from any larger storm events from that. So for example, a 100-year storm, or the properties that would still, that have flood insurance would still need to continue to carry that flood insurance. But it will protect the communities from a flood event similar in size to the 2017 event.
And then you answered this question, but I want to ask it again because it's phrased a little differently. And that's how quickly do the passive walls rise? And you talked about they respond to the water and then are elevated kind of in that to pace with the rise in the water level. Anything to add to that?
No, just to reiterate that again, in the areas where there's going to be traffic concerns, we will be installing the options to proactively raise those to minimize traffic impacts.
Okay. And then we have the question about anti-graffiti treatment on any of these passive barriers that may be valuable for quality of life in those neighborhoods.
Yes, so we will work with our O&M staff to determine the best ways to address that. I know in terms of for the walls or whatever, I know there is anti-graffiti coating, but our O&M staff has found that it's actually easier to just repaint when the cases when that happens, as opposed to applying the coating. So we will be working closely with our O&M staff to maintain the integrity of the elements.
And if I may chime in as well, typically a blank wall or is a very inviting canvas, but if there is artwork on it, or if there is treatment on it, it's not as inviting as just a blank canvas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Alec, you answered this question generally, but I want to pose it again because it's worded a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. Can the passive barrier sustain weight? And you provided examples of the array of jurisdictions in the United States, and many of these practices were actually established in Europe because of all of their rivers and flooding. And but it sounds like there's a concern that the passive barriers would not support activities like driving on them, booths when communities holding events.
And in fact, one of our vendors shared with us a video of there was a car that was stuck on a passive barrier during a flood event, and the barrier was still able to rise up, and it just flipped the car and was still able to protect the area it was intended to protect.
Excellent. Did you have anything to add, Alec, on that?
No, I was just going to say, we have the example in Texas that was most recently shared. I believe that was also shared in the July meeting as well. The image, it was a passive barrier across a highway. So, you have big trucks going on that highway, driving over these passive barriers every day. And I don't expect that level of traffic at William Street Park. So.
Okay, great. At this point, I think as I'm viewing the questions submitted in the Q&A portal, and thank you again for responding to that request, I want to invite folks, before we jump into the William Street Park specific project, invite those from Watson Park. Are there any meeting participants, folks with us tonight, that have a specific question about the Watson Park project?
And Jose, can you go ahead and launch the poll results for the Watson Park poll, just so we can have those up in case anyone has specific comments on that? Thank you.
And I'm watching, I see a number on William Street, but I'll just give folks a couple minutes. I'd like to invite Valley Water staff to share if there are additional Facebook Live questions that either you could read aloud for us or also enter into the Q&A portal. I'm not hearing any.
And I also want to say at this point, while we've been focusing on questions, if anyone just has any comments on the parks or the elements in terms of, wanting to share why they chose whichever option they did, now is a good time to share that as well, because it's nice for us to know some of the reasons behind just the vote. So that would be a good opportunity
Great.
for people to chime in on that.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. We'd like to bring Brian into the meeting to ask his question live. Brian?
Go ahead, Brian, you're unmuted.
Hi, Brian.
Go ahead, Brian, and unmute yourself.
Maybe while he's working on that function key. Julianne, can you respond to this? It's another general question. How hard is it to get the barriers back down? And do you need to remove the mud and debris in order for it to return to its level resting space?
So in theory, what will happen is as the floodwaters recede, they will go back down on their own. But as part of our post-flood cleanup, our O&M team will go out and inspect them and remove any debris that may be in the way of those barriers returning to their natural position.
Okay, great. Kind of typical inspection before, so they're ready for the next.
Yep.
Christine, we've got another person with their hand raised. We can unmute Bev.
Hi, Bev. Do you want to ask your question?
Beverly, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Got it. Sorry. First time. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you for the courage to do so.
Okay. Well, everybody that's voting is voting on all the reaches. So you're going to get all the same results, I would think. I consistently voted for the wall covering. So wouldn't you want the locals to make that decision? Or is it you want the whole thing? You got my point.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, that's a fair point. And I think part of that is unfortunately just the constraints of having to do this virtually. When we were planning on doing this in public, we were going to try and focus the groups on, the Watson Park group being more the residents that were actually living in local to Watson Park. And then, for example, the William Street Park groups, keep those together. Unfortunately, just with the nature of being virtual, yes, there will be people that can vote for options that may not be as directly relevant to them. But I still think that the community that will be directly impacted their voices will be heard, and they can always reach out directly as well if they feel that an option is being presented that is not representative of the community.
Mike, can we bring Brian back into the meeting? Has he successfully unmuted himself?
That did not work.
Okay.
I think Brian's gone. But
okay, and he's welcome to submit
absolutely.
His question in the Q&A portal. We have another general question, Julia, that I think it would be good for you to address. And it reads, how much higher will the water stage be if the 2017 storm and antecedent conditions reoccurred once all the proposed barriers are in place and functioning as a design, which is a great question.
Okay, so if I want to make sure I'm understanding this, if everything is in place as designed, a 20-year event happens, and then another event happens before the waters recede, is that what they're asking?
I'm reading the question as well, and Patrick, I don't know if you're interested in a specific area, because that would also be helpful as well, and that might be beneficial for us. But generally speaking, when we design and construct a flood protection project, the level of protection that we are providing, regardless of the level of protection, we don't make situations worse for surrounding community members. So by removing certain community members, we don't, transfer that risk downstream, for example. So I just want to share that. If there's a specific concern or location that you are interested in, feel free to email Julianne or Jose, and we can definitely discuss that in more detail.
No, it's odd to me, Jim, is that they're protecting houses that don't need protection. This is where the water is.
I'm sorry? Do you mind repeating that question? I lost the first part.
Bev, go ahead and unmute.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
This is another question. It seems to me that most of the damage that was done in the William Street area was the houses that were north of William Street.
Correct.
And the houses that are along the park are 20 feet above the street, aren't they?
That is correct, but some of the water that impacted the houses north of William Street came from the park and it came down 16th Street. And that's why retaining the water in the park will help protect those houses north of the park.
Hmm.
It's not intended to protect the houses directly across from the park. It's the on 16th Street. It's the ones north of the park.
What are you saying?
But I mean, you could run the barrier across 16th Street.
So there were a lot of concerns with that in terms of blocking off access to the street itself, both in terms of emergency access and access to the residents as they're trying to leave their residences during a flood event, and I think maintenance and some other issues, and that's why keeping the water in the park was deemed the best fit for this project.
Yeah, no negative impacts to the emergency services in that area.
Great, thanks for posing that question. I don't see any specific questions on Watson Park. I know we have a number of folks that are interested in have questions on William Street Park. Before we jump into William Street Park, I would like to invite any of our meeting participants that have a specific question on the Rock Spring Park project alternatives, those aesthetic alternatives.
And then Jose, could you launch the poll results again for the Rock Springs Park? Great, thank you.
Do we have anyone that either would like to join the meeting and submit their question verbally or in the chat? We're reviewing it now and I am not seeing anything. Mike, do you have anybody on Facebook Live that's got a question related to that specific neighborhood?
Not seeing any.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Okay.
All right.
Then
Want to jump into Williams?
Yes.
William Street Park.
Hold on, I'm trying. There we go. So Jose, let's go ahead and launch the results of the first poll, and we'll take any kind of questions, comments directly related to this this particular option, and then we'll work through the 3 polls, and then we'll take any more general questions and comments on William Street Park. So as a reminder, the landscape strip was the clear winner on for this poll. Did anyone have any questions or comments specifically to that option?
I do see a number in the Q&A portal. One reads, where does the William Street barrier end? What equivalent house number from 625 and 635 South 16th?
So it will tie, as we showed, it will tie in to the vertical barrier that will rise near the footbridge that crosses Coyote Creek. So I believe that's the equivalent of 797 East William Street.
And then all the way down 16th Street and tying into the flood wall that wraps around those two properties, right, Julia?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you. The next one related to this location is, would the William Street bike pedestrian bridge be underwater in a flood?
That is a good question. Off the top of my head, I would have to check the model. I'm not sure. I will look into that and get back to you.
Great.
If whoever that person is, if they want to shoot me an email, yeah, that's probably the best, and I'll get back to them.
Yeah, that was Lawrence Ames.
Okay.
So.
Christine, we have someone with their hand raised.
Oh, thank you.
Susan, go ahead and unmute yourself.
This is Susan Snidall from the William Street Task Force of CCA. And I just want to thank you, Alec and Julianne, so much for taking our concerns into such appreciation, or you really changed the design based on what our concerns were, and we appreciate that so very much. So that's a comment. A question I would have was, we of course are very concerned about the trees that are adjacent to the sidewalk on 16th Street. Some of them are very close. Would it be possible to get consultation from an arborist about what a design might look like that might offer these trees the most protection from the construction?
So we do have an arborist as part of the design team. They are actually currently in the process of conducting the tree survey for the entire 9-mile stretch of the project. And they will be working closely with the designer on the project. And we will be working, we have different requirements, and we know we need to stay away from the trees by X amount. And we've been working on massaging the design and getting it to a point where we are minimizing the impacts to as many trees as we can throughout the entire project.
Thank you. And I see that you really designed it to avoid that entrance oak at the corner of 16th and William Street. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Susan.
Christine, we
Yes.
did have, I wanted to make sure to mention that I don't believe some of the polling results are appearing on Facebook Live. So there was a question about how many people are voting, and most of these have had over 30 people voting. And we do plan to keep this polling feature open for another week. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Mike. Great point. Great point. The next comment, this is a comment. The William Street sign can be tagged and looks like a massive solid wall. Perhaps the area that will be underwater when activated can be perforated. And I think one of the alternatives did have a.
Yeah, I know what they're talking about. I don't know that that wall can be, because I think it still needs to be solid in order to provide a seal as the wall move, or as the passive barrier moves up the wall and rises up. But we can certainly look in, again, we'll be working closely with our O&M staff to come up with whether it's a treatment or a paint or something that we put on there to do our best to minimize opportunities for graffiti.
Okay, great. We have a couple of questions on the cleaning of the creek channel. We're going to encourage those folks to direct those to you, Julianne, after the meeting directly. There's a question of how much will Valley Water compensate the city of San Jose for any loss of parkland. I'm assuming that most of these are incorporated into existing right away.
So that will be part of the ongoing easement negotiations that we'll be
Okay.
coordinating directly with the city on. You know, sometimes it's a land swap, sometimes it's that we will be compensating them. It's an ongoing process depending on the location. So we'll be working closely with this
Conversation, great.
Yep.
And then another note or question on William Street Park. The berm solution for William Street Park suggested at the last meeting varied in height. Will the passive barriers all be the same height? And what is that height?
So I think they will probably vary in height a little bit as well, similarly to how the berm was, in the sense that they will be I think lower as they get closer to the intersection of 16th Street, and higher as they higher as they get closer to the creek. And that's part of why we're going to have some of these transition points as well, in terms of the wiper walls will be at the transition points in vertical alignment as well as horizontal alignment of the walls. And I will have to double check the plans, but again, I think the heights will remain the same, roughly the same as what the berms had been. So ranging, I think, approximately from 2.5 to 4.5 feet tall when engaged.
Okay. And then we have a repeat on the question of where does the barrier end on the William Street Park? And both you and Alec responded to that question. Let's see.
Christine, do we want to take this opportunity to review some of the other poll results for William Street and see if anyone had a comment specifically?
Oh, of course. Yeah, great idea.
Jose, can you launch, I think it would be poll number 4 results. Okay. Yeah, I actually did want to give the public some opportunity to engage on this and hear specifically why they chose the options that they did, because I think there could be some valuable information here. So it looks like the seating incorporated option with the landscaping, and then the straight signage and the tree were the 2 most popular choices. So if anyone wants to comment and share why they, what they liked about those options, what they didn't like about the other option, I would love to hear that.
Do you want to add those alternatives on the screen that were tied to the?
Yeah, let me see if I can. Give me 1 minute here. Hold on.
Christine, while Julianne brings that up, we did receive one survey monkey response from Facebook attendee, and that was for the Watson Park wall options. The individual selected the wood panel option for Watson Park.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah, so again, here are the three options, and it looked like this one, option 1, and this one here, option 3, were the most popular of the 2.
I do see comments that a straight tree, since I wanted more benches, or I wanted more trees, a bench with tree would also be fine.
Okay.
There's one comment.
Good to know.
And then there's an additional comment. I like the idea of the tree option with seating, which isn't presented. And I know that the project team talked a lot over the last couple of weeks about different hybrids as potentials.
And that was specifically for this one, why I wanted to hear some of the feedback, because I had a sneaking suspicion that might be the case, that we may want to piecemeal a little bit here. We were trying to not overwhelm everybody with a million options, but wanted to make sure we were presenting some options. So that's good feedback. Thank you.
And it looks like there's more than one individual that shared that interest.
Okay. Okay, great. Good to know.
And then there is a question that asks, can we see the design? So maybe this is a good time, Julie, to talk a little bit about maybe the high level substantive information that would be available at the spring open house and the summer open house, where you're going to afford members of the public really those one-on-one conversations to talk more about fine tuning the design.
Sure. As Christine mentioned, for our next round of open houses, we do plan on having more an open house format. I'm going to go ahead and jump up to the slide. One thing I want to emphasize is that from this point on, the two projects that we were showing, they're going to be following, up till now, they've been kind of in a parallel schedule, and we're presenting both projects at the same time. From this point on, they're going to be splitting and following their own project schedules. So what that means is the elements in reach 5, 6, and 7 that are part of the management measures project, so the part that will be constructed first, they will be moving forward more quickly from here. And so we will have meetings likely in the spring and summer for 60% and 90% for that project. And then the remaining elements, so all of reach 4, half or part of reach 6 and 7, and then all of reach 8 will be in the flood protection project. And we don't anticipate at this point any more meetings on that project until 2023. And what we anticipate, given, assuming current health guidelines allow for this at the time, is doing a more informal open house style meeting moving forward. So for those of you that attended the October Parks meetings, it would be similar to that first half hour of the meeting where we had, Valley Water staff would be available in a public space. We would have poster boards and other materials available. And it would be a more formal one-on-one conversation, giving you guys updates on what's happening, soliciting your feedback perhaps on a couple different elements, and just allowing you guys to have that direct conversation at that point. And then, as always, meeting details will be on the website once they're finalized. Again, the website we have posted here, and I think we posted it in the chat a couple of times, but www.valleywater.org/Coyote-Creek. And then we'll also notify everybody the same way that we have for this public meeting, other public meetings. So mailers, email list, social media. So just, stay tuned. But again, the website is always a great resource to check in on.
Great. It looks like we have 2 meeting participants that have their hands raised.
Okay.
So first, we'd like to hear from Elizabeth.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, can you unmute?
Well, while she's doing that, it looks like the meeting participants have repeated the question about where the passive barrier ends along 16th. So it's probably worth.
I think I'm going to pull up that picture.
Worth repeating. Yeah.
Okay, so as a reminder, this is William Street here. This is, you can see right here, the bridge over the creek. And so I believe it's 797 East William Street. It's approximately in this area.
And then do you mind showing along 16th Street where it ends all the way?
Yeah, I'll do that in a second. And then, here is the rise at passive barrier that will, it will connect to the bridge railing here. That's where it will tie in here. And then it will wrap around. And then let's see on, I think this will be our better. No, we don't have a good view, but the aerial here shows where the barrier ties in at the 16th, the William Street Bridge over Coyote Creek. And then the passive barrier here, it will actually continue down 16th Street. Oh, I know where I can, hold on.
Julianne, once you finish this, Elizabeth's unmuted and ready to ask.
Okay, great. So there are 2 homes on 16th Street right here that will have a flood wall behind them, and the passive barrier along 16th Street will connect at that location down here.
Yeah, 650 and 654, I believe, are those 2 property addresses.
And that's
650.
near the driveway, right?
Yeah, and there's a driveway, concrete driveway, I believe, right now that accesses the park. So the passive barrier will go across that driveway, lay flat. So vehicles can still enter the park over the passive barrier, and then it'll tie into the flood wall in orange.
Thank you. Elizabeth, would you like to share your comment or question?
Yeah, that was, you'd asked about people being able to explain why they chose one thing or another on the poll.
Yeah.
The option for the passive wall at the junction, the one with the bench, the seating in the park, there's all kinds of picnic tables with benches, but there's nothing that has any kind of back support. Well, there's very few benches with back support. So that's why I liked the idea of having another bench where it actually has some back support.
Thank you. That's good feedback to have. Appreciate that.
Wonderful. All right. Any other? I'm just going to check any other.
We also had a hand raised from 625 and 635 South 16th. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks. I think that you guys
answered the question. Yeah, great.
You kept talking about the wrong end of the park. So it sounds like our house will not be flooded in the next event. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for raising your hand, and thanks for letting us know that we answered the question.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So there is a question here. It's unrelated to the alternatives, but it's a question about, or it's a comment, are the walls the only solution? Are there countries that solve similar flooding concerns differently, incorporating solutions that nature might inform us to use? So, I mean, part of that is probably backtracking a little bit on some of the public meetings and how we are where we are today.
Yeah, I think the easiest answer to that question is back in 2019, when the project was first started being presented to the public. I think at that time there were over 27 different scenarios and options for different locations and for the project as a whole. And that was presented to the public, information, input was received. And then each element and each location went through a very vigorous review process internally. And we've got what we call a framework that we apply to each of these elements that addresses feasibility, cost, a variety of different key components that are important to each of these elements and each of these locations. And then from that, all those solutions and possible solutions were narrowed down to what became the project. And that's, all those past public meetings and past presentations are available on the website if anyone does want to go back and kind of relook at what some of those other options are and kind of see how we got to where we are today. But it's not like we just decided we picked walls and went with it. There was a big process, several years long process that went into coming up with the best preferred project for this area.
Yeah, definitely. All right. This is not a question, but a comment. Just wanted to say great job, everyone. Really appreciate the presentation. So, and Julianne and Alec and Jose, I know, are very passionate about seeing this project through, along with the board of directors and all of staff. There is a question, will there be a future meeting regarding parcels that may be purchased? And I know Alec and Julianne, you've talked about that.
So we have been meeting specifically or independently with each of those potential property owners, and will continue to do so with those owners directly. There will not be a public meeting specifically to address those, but we will be continuing to work directly with those particular property owners to determine the best solution for their particular property.
So one of the questions is about the dimension of the seating. Is that something that would be discussed potentially in the spring or in the summer when you fine-tuned some of the design?
Yeah, I think so. We, at this point, we were just trying to determine what what the community was looking to see, and we will continue to refine that design. And now that we know that that's really important to the community, we'll look at, some of it will depend on each location, because some of the wiper walls are going to be different dimensions, and so that will obviously impact the dimensions of what seating may be available in those locations. But we will continue to refine that design, and that may be something that we can talk about in the spring.
Okay, there's just one more question that I see here. I do see, it looks like we do have members of the public that are continuing to enter questions. I'm sure you're assuming that you're putting in the Q&A portal, but I'm seeing them in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind entering them into the Q&A portal rather than the chat, that would be great. And there's a question here, Alec, about Anderson Dam and the need for any downstream flood protection measures that may be better discussed offline, but just wanted to invite you if you have any information to respond to that question.
Sure, I can give a high-level summary
Yeah.
of the connection between Coyote Creek and Anderson Dam. The milestones for completion of both of these two projects are tied to milestones of work completions on Anderson Dam. The Coyote Creek flood management measures need to be constructed and in place by December of 2023. That coincides with the completion of the Anderson Dam Tunnel project, which would release flows downstream, and we want to make sure that those flows do not flood any areas along Coyote Creek. So that is the purpose of the flood management measures. Afterwards, the tunnel project, there will be a higher level tunnel project that will be completed in fall of 2025. That when that begins operation in fall 2025, the Coyote Creek flood protection project needs to be constructed and in place so that those flows do not negatively impact residents downstream.
Great, thank you very much. And the next question is, how soon will these projects proposals be in place? And so maybe Julianne, you mentioned it a little bit, some of the next steps. So maybe you can forecast based upon the spring and summer open houses, the next steps in the process.
Sure. So for the flood management measures portion of the project, those elements, the design is anticipated to be completed July 1st of this year. And then construction, I think we're looking at beginning in October of this year, and construction will be completed by the end of 2023, again, to tie into the Anderson Dam Tunnel project completion date. And then the design for the remaining elements of the project is anticipated to be completed, I think, I'm blanking, but I think it's next summer, versus summer, early fall of 2023. Construction is slated to begin approximately December of 2023 and be completed by the end of 2025.
Wonderful, thank you. So we've responded to, it looks like about 51 questions or read folks' comments. Now I'd just like to invite meeting participants to offer, if you have any other kind of high level project questions. Oh, go ahead, Julianne.
Oh, Christina, I don't think we talked about the poll results for the concrete or for the color on the passive barrier.
Oh,
I don't know
great.
if anyone has any specific comments on that, but Mike, excuse me, Jose, if we can launch those results again, that would be helpful. And here, I'll show the picture again. Okay, so I think the response was kind of overwhelmingly on this dirt path color. I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to chime in if they wanted to share, specifically if they had one of the other options, why they chose that, and or even on the dirt path, what their opinions were.
Julianne, for folks on Facebook Live, 66%, 23 out of 35 voted for the natural or dirt path color. 3 out of 35 or 9% for matching the existing concrete, and then 9 out of 35, 26% for the greenish color.
Thank you.
Any comments on those poll results from those attending the meeting today? I voted for green, but I'm fine with dirt path. Excellent.
Yeah, and what we may end up doing is kind of like we showed here is maybe the barrier that really doesn't lead anywhere. This one here on Long William Street that's not intended as a path per se. We may make that one the green one so that it's visually different from the others and not as inviting to like walk on. And then the ones that are intended more as a path to be like that natural dirt path color to make it stand out a little bit more as a potential walking surface. That's something that we would continue to refine as the design progresses, but that's important feedback to hear. So thank you.
Okay, and then we have another meeting participant that indicated they forgot to submit in that poll, and they like green will look more natural. So they're certainly welcome to submit that on that online survey.
Yes, please.
Any update for the homes along the outdoor classroom about the wall being built? I'm not familiar
So
with this.
that's the flood wall that is part of management measures project. And so again, that is still part of the project, and we will be coordinating and reaching out to those property owners within the next couple of months to solicit their feedback specifically on what the wall will look like on their side of the wall, as well as give them specific updates moving forward. But that is still happening.
Great. Another comment, yes, walkable segments brown, not walkable green. That's just a comment.
Okay.
And thank you for that comment, Lawrence. Julianne, can you talk a little bit again about how will the project team aggregate the polling information that folks supplied tonight with the survey data with the same questions that'll be available online for folks that were unable to participate in tonight's meeting?
Yeah, so as has been mentioned previously, we're gonna have that poll up there for I think about a week, and then we will I think it'll be our communication staff. They'll take those results. We haven't quite figured out exactly if we're going to then throw that in an Excel spreadsheet or in then add the results from today's call in there as well. But we will gather, collect that data together, determine what the number one choices for each of these locations will be, and then we'll coordinate, with the design team. We'll coordinate with the property owners, in this case, San Jose and the parks, and kind of move forward with that information. We will, as part of our meetings in the spring, kind of the design will progress enough that we will be showing how that information has been implemented into the plans. Most of these elements that we're showing today are actually part of the flood protection project. So you probably won't be seeing those implemented until the 2023 meetings, but that they will be incorporated into the design moving forward.
I'm assuming that there'll be some type of summary information in that spring open house that'll show these were the overall results and how it informed.
While the spring open house will be focused on the management measures project, we can certainly include, a poster board or something. We'll work on how best to present that. We can include that for those that are interested.
And we do have the repeat question regarding graffiti and the concerns. And the interest is could the design team look into wiper walls? Could the flat walls have artwork and murals? So obviously that's something that the team is going to spend some focus, time, and attention to address.
Yes, and as kind of mentioned earlier, a blank wall is more inviting to a graffiti artist than something that has a design. The wiper walls will get a little bit tricky just because the function. We need to make sure we maintain the function of the wall in terms of what treatment we put on it to make sure we have a good seal as the passive barrier rises up. The good news, the potential good news is if graffiti is placed on those wiper walls, and a flood event happens before the appropriate maintenance staff can get out there and address it, that should not impact the seal of the passive barrier rising up against the wall, but it will just limit what options we can do to treat the wall to help prevent that graffiti from occurring in the first place.
Great, great. I don't see any other comments or questions in the Q&A portal, and it's 7:40. We're scheduled to wrap up at about 8 o'clock tonight. While we're waiting for participants to, formulate final comments or questions, I just want to invite Alec and Julianne. Do you have any other closing comments related to where the project is today, the information received, how it's going to inform design, and any other project milestones that might be useful for folks in the meeting today?
I just want to, thank everybody for taking the time out and participating in the meeting and providing their feedback with their comments or, live, more importantly, voting on the polls. I know the team has worked really hard on taking the feedback that we received in October and revising the design to address that feedback. So I'm very happy to see that that was positively received. And I hope that, when this is all done, everyone will have a project that they are happy with and enjoy seeing on the day-to-day, and as well as protecting them from a flood event in the future.
Yeah, I just want to echo similar to what Julianne said. Thank you for all the feedback that everyone has provided thus far, past public meetings today as well. Please do continue to share your feedback. It is, as I think Susan mentioned and several people mentioned, we do look at it, we do consider it, we do incorporate it as much as can feasibly be done with the limitations that we have. So don't stop. You have Julianne's contact information, Jose's contact information. If there's any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us.
And just final question, Mike, do we have any other hands raised?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. So with that,
I see a hand raised.
Oh, great. Join, please.
Susan Snidel, one moment. Go ahead and unmute, Susan.
Well, thank you for listening to me again. I have a question. There seems to be a lot more landscaping involved in the drawings of once the barriers are in, particularly along William Street, but also the landscaping adjacent to the sidewalk or between the sidewalk and the passive barriers. Will this landscaping, both the preparation and installation and maintenance, is there funding in Valley Water's project for this, or is the city simply expected to come up with the funding and all the wherewithal to do this?
So that's kind of a multi-answer question. So in terms of the initial landscaping and whatever is initially installed, that will be part of, it's considered part of the project and will be part of the cost of the project. Maintenance and ongoing costs for the landscaping, for example, in the parks, would be a coordination effort with the city of San Jose, would be part of that easement discussion. One other thing that we had talked about in our preparation meetings for this meeting is Valley Water does have some potential grant money available that could help. I know the community, particularly in William Street Park, they have a very active group that does a lot of the gardening. For example, I think the entry garden. So there could be some opportunities to partner with them on maintaining what is there. We would definitely be looking to install vegetation that is native, drought tolerant, and would therefore hopefully require minimal maintenance. And that will be, part of the ongoing design coordination as we move forward.
So as I understand, the initial design and installation of any additional landscaping, such as shown in the drawings, would actually be part of the project. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And down the line, we would really like to renew and refresh and get all the good drought tolerant native plants into our community entrance garden. So maybe we would like to partner with you on renewing that section of it. But of course, we didn't want to do anything there until all this construction is complete.
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Any other hands raised, Mike?
Do not see any hands raised.
And the 57 comments and questions have been addressed. And folks have been very obliging and transitioning from chat to Q&A. I don't see anything missing as far as a staff comment or response. So with that, Julianne, if we can switch screen share.
Oh, yeah.
And Carol, thanks for offering your appreciation to the team. My observation is this is a passion project for this staff, which is wonderful. You want that type of investment. So next steps, we've talked about it a couple of times, but there'll be upcoming open houses this spring and summer that will be informed by the input provided this evening, as well as the extended survey that will be available through the course of the week. This meeting will be recorded and uploaded to the project webpage. So folks that want to view the conversation and the Q&A and the comments in order to complete the survey are welcome to do so, and that's available on the project page. And we really want to thank you again for investing several hours of your evening to participate and contribute to this important community project. And we've talked about it at a team level. It's a legacy project and you're part of that legacy. So thank you so much for joining. And with that, I say good night.
Night, everyone.
Good night.